Hi, my name is Rachel Cohen, and I am the president of J Street U at Johns Hopkins University. Salam Fayyad, Occupy Judaism, the Israeli social justice movement, inequality in pay for men and women in Jewish organizations, Marwan Barghouti. These are just some of the topics that Jane Eisner has written about recently in her role as the editor of the Jewish Daily Forward. In doing so, she explores and engages with some of the most important questions facing all of us, my generation especially, as we look to the future of Israel, its neighbors, and the role of the American Jewish community here. As a young woman, I am especially honored to introduce Jane Eisner tonight. 5 years ago in 10th grade, I read her book, Taking Back the Vote, which played a truly influential role in helping me to realize the necessity of political participation in enacting meaningful social change. She is one of the most important voices in our community, highlighting the distance that remains in ensuring that the American Jewish community is fair and equal and continues to raise up women's leadership. I'm honored to introduce Jane Eisner.
Thank you, Rachel. It is always a special privilege and a pleasure to hear Rabbi Hartman speak, and I thank him for his inspirational words of Torah and the Zionism that he embodies. I am here for a different reason. As head of a news organization that covers J Street and the many fascinating aspects of the contemporary American Jewish story, what I can contribute, I hope, are a few words not of text, but of context. That's what we journalists do. We tell stories, and we try to tell you what they mean. The story happening here and around America is one of a Jewish community at a historic turning point. We face challenges that we might not have even imagined a generation or two ago. Challenges brought by our prosperity, our transition from a victimized minority to a group with extraordinary wealth, social status, and political power. And alongside the challenges that come with power, that is, first and foremost, to use it well, we have an unprecedented opportunity to bring our religious values and our faith commitment into the public square. So how will we do that? There's an old saying that good journalism is all about comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. We Jews are, for the most part, the comfortable in 21st century America, and we need to recognize that, to absorb that, to allow it to shape our public behavior, our religious expression, and our pro-Israel advocacy. To illustrate how quickly this change has happened and how very American it is, I'll start with a brief story. Some years ago, I was named the London correspondent for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Before moving there, I went to look for a place to live, and since my visit was during Sukkot, a friend from our Chavra in Philadelphia put me in touch with an English family, and they offered to host me for a meal. So there I am, sitting at their table. I'm trying to sort of build a kind of connection with them. And so I thought I'd relay some news about our mutual friend. I told my English hosts about our Chavra's celebration of Simchat Torah the previous year. We brought the Torahs from the place where we had davened into Rittenhouse Square in Center City, Philadelphia. We danced out in the open and invited others to join in. Our mutual friend, who was a rabbi, took great delight in standing in the middle of the street, leading to the square, his arms stretched out like this, stopping traffic for us to cross. So I joyfully recounted how wonderful it was to see our friend dressed in a white kittel, holding up cars and bicycles as if he was Moses crossing the Red Sea. All of this in public, in the fanciest square in Philadelphia. Well, this did not go over as I had planned. Rather than delight in my story, my hosts were stunned silent. They were too polite to say what I realized afterwards they were probably thinking, which is that American Jews are crazy to be so demonstrative in public, to literally bring their religious zeal into the public square. And maybe we were then, but we no longer are now. Let's fast forward to October 2011. Another group of young engaged Jews wearing white kittles are leading a prayer service outdoors, but this time it's Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, and the place is not a small fancy square in Philadelphia, but a large encampment just steps from Wall Street, the center of finance in the richest country on the planet. Instead of a few dozen people dancing with Torahs, the Kol Nidre service associated with Occupy Wall Street last year drew hundreds of Jews, and probably some non-Jews, who repeated ancient prayers and beat their breasts in repentance under the bright lights of Lower Manhattan. This was an extraordinary assertion of power and identity, a sign of arrival for Jews, and, in a sense, a return to the historic place that religion has played in the public face of progressive activism in America. At the time, it seemed kind of new and gutsy, because for at least the past 3 decades, religious expression in the political sphere has been dominated by evangelical conservatives, a trend that we are seeing in dismaying detail in this current Republican presidential primary. But the right has not always had a monopoly on the expression of faith in the public square. In a sense, the Jews who chanted Kol Nidre were upholding a tradition that began in the Revolutionary War, continued through the anti-slavery and civil rights movements, and even was manifested in the protest against the Vietnam War, a weaving together of faith tradition and progressive politics. There was a time not very long ago when rabbis like Abraham Joshua Heschel marched for civil rights, and Arthur Waskow created a Freedom Seder, and Catholic priests and nuns were instrumental in anti-war agitation, their actions propelled by a fervent religiosity and expressed in liturgical terms. Rooted in this progressive past, this new form of what some of us have been calling Occupy Judaism is very much a creature of the moment. It could not have come together without the extensive use of social media by savvy organizers who didn't need or seek the blessings of communal leadership. Like the social justice protests that swept Israel last year, it is bottom-up, not top-down, in both its political and its religious character. And to be successful and sustainable, this style of activism requires more than just a motivation for change. It's not just that the organizers of Occupy Judaism didn't depend on a hechsher from the Jewish establishment. They were knowledgeable enough and skilled enough to conduct a service on their own. This, I think, is an important point. If we are, as Jews, going to bring about a new relationship of faith in the public square, we have to know what our faith tradition believes and what it asks of us. The foundation for this new relationship can't be built on some squishy iteration of tikkun olam or other sorts of bland universal sentiments. If we're going to be more public Jews, we have to know what Judaism requires of us. And similarly, if you're going to be effective advocates for Israel, you have to be informed, learn more, visit, debate, engage. We also have to recognize that a religious tradition as old and as rich as ours emits several and sometimes competing strains of values and narratives. We can't be so arrogant as to say that the true Judaism is only a progressive one. An even greater challenge is to incorporate a realistic appraisal of who we are in this society into our public role. It seems to me that most of the establishment Jewish organizations operate under the assumptions of the last century, that Jews are vulnerable and this close to another disaster, and that the best people to lead those organizations are white men of a certain age and experience. I understand where that comes from. Our history is littered with examples of Jews attaining great wealth and status. Think of Spain in the 14th century or Germany a century ago, only to have that privilege crumble under the oppressive weight of an Inquisition or a Holocaust. I understand the fear that good moments will evaporate in an instant. Hey, I'm a Jewish mother. Guilt and anxiety are my constant companions. But those episodes in history didn't happen in America, which I believe has a far more tolerant DNA, and despite our sometimes ugly past, has a far better chance of guaranteeing the rights of minorities than any other place on earth. Never mind the fact that Americans love us here. They really do. Robert Putnam, in his recent seminal work, Amazing Grace: How Religion Divides Us and Unites Us, asserts that we Jews are the most popular religious group in America, and he offers the data to back it up. This very fact, I know, does create a kind of cognitive dissonance with some Jews. I actually spoke to Putnam about this, and he told me that when he lectured at his own Reform synagogue just outside Boston about this topic, and here I'm quoting, he said, people said, "You're wrong, they do hate us." And he replied to them, "Best as I can tell, they don't." They don't. So as you chart the future of pro-Israel advocacy, I urge you to do that in the context of this new reality. We are a vulnerable people in many places in the world. The tragic events last week in Toulouse are just only the latest reminder. But right now, here in America, we are in a fundamentally different place, and we are a fundamentally different people. We should never forget that power is always a privilege, that it can corrupt those who wield it, and that it comes with its own sense of demands and responsibilities. As we become more assertive in the public square, we should also be mindful to support and maintain the constitutional separation of religion and state that I believe has enabled us to function as such a free religious minority and ethnic group here in this country. When I was researching an essay on Occupy Judaism last fall, I had a wonderful conversation with Alan Wolf, a political scientist at Boston College, and he offered an astute observation. By linking public prayer with protest, he told me, quote, "It says that the protest has an element of the sacred associated with it." Invoking holiness in the public square, implying that such work is divinely inspired, can make us uncomfortable because it can smack of the kind of arrogance and certainty that becomes dangerous and intolerant. But thinking of this as sacred work can also be viewed in another way. It can encourage humility. You can embrace a new, vibrant role for Jewish faith and progressive activism that is also respectful of the past and intent on upholding that legacy. For me, this balance is beautifully enunciated by Martin Luther King in his letter from a Birmingham jail, and I can't help but quote that in my closing. "We must come to see that human progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and persistent work of men willing to be co-workers with God. Thank you.